In the transparency and gamut preferences, you don't usually need to change much here. If you're bored, you could change the size of the grid, making the checkerboard pattern larger or smaller. You can also choose a new color to help accessorize. Everybody likes a pink checkerboard pattern, of course. The checkbox here for Use Video Alpha requires hardware support probably doesn't affect you. I know you're probably excited as this is the first place you've ever noticed the words Video Alpha inside of Photoshop. However, what I want you to keep in mind is this is really to preview transparency using a hardware video card. These are for the few folks in the world that are feeding graphics directly out of Photoshop and want to test their keys. Chances are this does not affect you. Go ahead and click Next. In our Units and Rulers tab, we have a couple of choices here that are important. I usually choose to set my rulers to pixels. That's because video graphics are measured in pixels, and I find it a lot easier to measure in the same standard that I'm using to build. Column size doesn't matter, that's for print. New document resolution doesn't matter. There's a myth that video graphics are 72 dpi. Well, in fact, screen graphics are measured in pixels per inch, or ppi. However, if you're working with graphics for the web or video, the screen resolution doesn't actually matter. All that matters is the total pixel dimension. Go ahead and click Next. In the grids, guides, and slices, you can make a couple of changes, but these are all for aesthetic purposes. You may choose to change the color of your guides. I'll often use light red. You can use lines or dashed lines. It's purely subjective. And if you need to, you could add a grid and adjust the sizing of it. If you've ever been working in Photoshop and all of a sudden you have this strange pattern on the screen with a bunch of little numbers, you probably accidentally accessed web slices. This is when a designer will take a large graphic and cut it into smaller pieces for quicker download times or variable levels of compression. I'll go ahead and turn off Show Slice Numbers, which will make it a lot less annoying if I accidentally turn slices on for an image. Go ahead and click Next. Here we specify our plugins and our scratch disk. If you're a freelancer or you have an extra set of plugins and you want to carry it with you, say on a USB thumb drive, you can go ahead and turn on the additional plugins folder and select a folder. Also, if you've ever been working in Photoshop and you get the message, couldn't complete last request, or warning, scratch disks are full, it's because you've run out of RAM. Photoshop prefers to use physical RAM in your computer. However, if you don't have very much, eventually you're going to run out. Hard disk space can be used for virtual memory. Photoshop, though, needs to know which disks to use. For best results, don't use your startup disk as the scratch disk. Rather, pick a different disk, such as a second internal or external drive. Go ahead and click Next. Our next pane is for memory usage. This is where you tell Photoshop how much RAM it's allowed to use. Make sure that Photoshop has at least 300 megabytes of RAM if you'd like it to run smoothly. Go ahead and click Next. Our last preference tab is for the File Browser, and this is new to Photoshop CS. We had the File Browser in version 7, but now we have a lot more controls over it, and it has its own tab in the Preferences tab. Here you could say to ignore very large files. We can also choose a custom thumbnail size. This means that if we are looking at thumbnails, we can have a much larger size. Instead of typing a number in here, I'm going to show you something new with Photoshop CS. We could just come to the value here and click and drag to the right or left, making the number bigger or smaller. For those of you who've used Adobe After Effects, you should recognize these scrubbable values. I usually prefer high-quality previews, so I have some idea of what I'm working with. That brings us to the end of our Normal Preferences panel, so I can click OK to apply the preferences. However, we're not done yet. Just above the General Preferences area is a setting for color settings. It is extremely important to turn color management off. Color management attempts to simulate on screen how colors will look, either on a printing press or in the web. While this may seem useful, it's important to realize that video screens don't have color management. If you leave color management on, you may get some very unusual color shifts. Always turn color management off. I can go ahead and click OK, and my preferences are applied. While that may seem like a lot of extra work, all you need to do is do that once, and the preferences will stick onto your next session.